Ah, how sweet the sound of the real sounds of Africa that saved a wretch like me when I wasn't on the World Football Phony. I'd almost forgotten what it was like. Football Fan by Real Sounds of Africa to once again kick off our World Football Phone-in. And this morning we're talking football in Europe and South America. The Sarahs, Paul Sarahs is with us. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Dotun. Almost forgotten what your voice sounded like.
Yeah, you got me back. Tim Vickery, the Legendino, is here as well. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning. Hold the back page. Stop everything. Stop it all. Stop everything. I have some breaking news here.
Oh, really?
Very, very serious breaking.
Okay,
very, very serious breaking
Let's stop the music.
Yeah. You ready?
Yeah.
We have the first dog on the field in the Copa Libertadores 2018. Black and white mongrel in Venezuela. Looked quite well fed, and he ran onto the field in the second half of the game between Deportivo Táchira of Venezuela and Macará of Ecuador. Perhaps a little bit disgruntled by a 0-0 draw. He wanted to provide a little bit of entertainment. It wouldn't be South American football. It wouldn't be the Copa Libertadores without a dog. First dog on the field of the Libertadores 2018.
Only one dog.
So far, yeah, but this is just the first week of action. I mean, I just put this on Twitter, and someone's replied, in South America, there are probably 3 dogs for every 1 inhabitant. So it's probably the first of many. And maybe, on my dog, it's a bit hot for him at the moment, so he's just having a little sleep. But maybe he'll be animated later on tonight to join in the fun and festivities. Welcome back, Dotun. Nick did a sterling job for standing in for you last week, but we missed you.
Indeed. Well, I miss you lot as well, I can tell you that. So we're talking football in Europe and South America and players from over there playing in our league. So if you'd like to join in the conversation, do pick up the phone on 08085 909 693. That's 08085 909 693. Let's start off there with an email from John T, who's been listening since 2005, first in Japan, now in France, staying well away from Blighty. It's great to have you back, Dotun, he says. Whenever you go missing, it's like the assistant teacher comes in and Tim runs riot in the classroom. That lad deserves detention. That lad deserves
That's exactly the opposite of what happens.
Exactly.
I tend to behave myself.
I'm glad to hear that. So you're going to run riot tonight? Okay, I think I'll be able to deal with it. I'll be the supply referee for tonight. Anyway, I have a question about time wasting. All right, no time wasting from you lot tonight, okay? I'm the supply referee, remember? I have a question about time wasting inspired by the Independiente keeper who in the recent Sudamericana final feigned a finger injury which he supposedly sustained when he was clapping his own defenders. So he didn't sustain the finger injury whilst trying to save the ball, but when he was clapping his own defenders. Anyway, he quickly removed his glove as though suffering a medical emergency and spent a minute or two rolling around on the floor inside his 6-yard box, screaming in apparent agony. We shouldn't laugh because he could have been in agony, I know. He finally stood up and put his glove back on when the ref arrived, holding a yellow card. Now, this bit we should laugh about. So my question is, what are the most ridiculous examples of time wasting our pundits have ever witnessed in their respective regions? I'll go to Paul first, Tim, and you can fill us in on what this scene was like. But Paul, can you think of anything, the most ridiculous example of time wasting in Europe that you've come across?
Here's the thing, Dalton. It may seem ridiculous, but it does a really important job, I think, at the end of games to manage the clock. And I think one that's come in recent times is the sudden and abrupt disappearance of the ball boys from around the edge of the pitch. It happens quite frequently now, where if you're a goal behind, all of a sudden there seems to be dozens and dozens of ball boys around the pitch ready to throw the ball back on. And if you're, a goal up and under a bit of pressure, they will almost disappear immediately. As soon as the nod is given. So, I mean, they may seem ridiculous. If there was a couple of minutes of time wasted there on the goalkeeper's terrible finger injury, well, I bet the referee didn't add 2 minutes on.
Should we not at least be applauding the ingenuity of the youngers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Of the younger people, they're always being maligned for wasting time in school and otherwise. And here they're making a trade out of wasting time.
millennial geniuses in these things. It's,
they'll take over the world, you know.
They will one day.
Well, yeah, just not tomorrow, please. We're still there. What about in South America then, Tim?
Well, these things are old, tried and tested South American standbys. When the disappearing ball boys, it's been part of our game over here for years and years and years. And the goalkeeper, it's really becoming a problem. And I was in the stadium for that game, where our friend there, it was Jonty, was talking about the Independiente goalkeeper. That was on the 13th of December. Now, if the referee had added on all the time that the goalkeeper wasted with a number of injuries, we'd still be playing now. You know, and so much time was eaten up. And it's usually the goalkeeper who's doing it. You can guarantee that when an unacclimatised side goes to altitude. Now, altitude is really difficult if you're not if you're not used to the conditions. There's just no oxygen in the air. You can't run your normal game. You want to slow things down as much as possible. You can guarantee that the visiting goalkeeper will pick up a yellow card for time wasting, because it's a way just to take the heat out of the game. And because these techniques have been developed at altitude, they've now spread. So now every time that a team is defending a lead and just wants to run down the clock, the goalkeeper is called upon to do the ridiculous time wasting. The most ridiculous thing I saw, even more ridiculous than a goalkeeper feigning injury, clapping his defenders, was a goalkeeper feigning cramp. No, if it's any outfield player feigning cramp, you could, but a goalkeeper feigning cramp. And I wrote a column on this recently because it really is getting out of hand, and it almost makes me think that, well, this is just being abused, and maybe to discourage this practice, there could be a special legislation going on whereby because the goalkeeper is the one player without whom the game cannot go on. Any other player, get him off the field, cart him off the field, and then the game carries on. The goalkeeper, it can't go on. And goalkeepers are abusing this privilege to waste time. So I was wondering, what about if, for these situations, exactly to avoid the goalkeeper wasting time, you had a second goalkeeper. If the first goalkeeper's injured, the second goalkeeper comes on automatically to cover the time while he's recovering. That would put an instant stop to it, although it would give opposing centre-forwards an incentive to injure your first choice goalkeeper. But I have a lot of time to ponder about these things while I'm waiting for the goalkeeper to get back up again.
Why would it
injury?
Why would it give opposing centre forwards an impetus to injure the goalkeeper then? Why? Because
then there is then the reserve keeper has to come on.
No, but the point I mean is they can do that anyway. It won't change much, will it? They can injure, if they want to injure the goalkeeper, they can injure the goalkeeper to such an extent the reserve keeper has to come on in any case. Do you know what I mean? I don't think it would be any more of an incentive.
But just kind of injure him for 5 minutes and you get reserve on for 5 minutes rather than take him out of the game.
Okay. How long, Tim, before the reserve goalkeeper, in his haste and desperation to get onto the pitch, pulls a hamstring on his way on? This is how ridiculous it is in certain places.
It is ridiculous, and I know it gets your goat, particularly Mr. Vickery. However, it is within the rules of the game, isn't it? I mean, taking the ball, I get irritated. Well, it is actually
ungentlemanly conduct.
But there is a penalty to it, Paul. The referee should be on the ball and be giving yellow cards, and that will soon make people recover. Do you know what I mean?
Here's a surefire way, probably the only surefire way to resolve this issue, and it's not one that really I particularly agree with, because I think it opens up the game to an awful lot of other things, but real time. We on average, the ball is in play around 62 to 64 minutes of the 90 in European football. Let's have 32-minute halves of football with real time. Every time the ball runs dead, stop the clock, and then time wasting is removed as a possible tool of
Tim, what do you reckon about
subterfuge.
That? I don't feel good about that.
I'll tell you why against it, because it legitimises the time wasting. Because the time wasting is done for two reasons. It's not only to eat up time, it's also to interrupt the rhythm. And once you go to that real time thing, that legitimises the idea of just stopping the rhythm. And I think it would be entirely counterproductive.
Okay. Give us your thoughts on that as well on 08085 909 693. You can react to what you've heard already, whether you agree or disagree. Let's speak to Daniel in the USA. Good morning, Daniel.
Hey, good morning, Don. It's Dan in Louisville, Kentucky. If you remember speaking to me a few months back.
I do remember, and I always say, Daniel, my brother, you are older than me. Do you still feel the pain?
Yeah, well, he's actually coming here for his last tour. Everyone's trying to get tickets.
Oh, yeah, of course, he's on his last tour now. Well, you say it's his last tour, but it's going to last 3 years. Good old Elton. There'll be people who have done 5 tours in that 3 years. Anyway, great to have you with us. And you want to talk about football in Italy, do you?
Yeah, so actually just a quick to rewind to give an update on the local soccer here. Louisville City ended up going on and winning the championship in the second division in the USA. And Tim will be happy because the game-winning goal on a brilliant header into the top corner was scored by Cameron Lancaster, a graduate from the Spurs Academy. So it was just a magical season, and the fans, stormed the field, and it was a crazy night, and one I think most people in town who went or watched it on TV will never forget. But yeah, I had a question actually, and it ties into Louisville because one of the Louisville players, one of his parents, I think his mom, or actually his dad, is from Italy, and he has an Italian passport. And he spent a couple weeks on trial at a club in Italy's third division called Reggiana, and they're actually owned by my favorite baseball player when I was a kid, Mike Piazza. And I was just curious if Paul, knew about how they were doing, and if anything like this, where an American sportsman from a different sport has come in and bought a club in the lower leagues and obviously trying to get them up, if that's happened anywhere else, and just what he thinks of that situation.
Yeah, I think Paul's about to declare an interest there, but you did say the Italian third division. Yeah, so go on, declare your interest, Paul.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dan.
I know. You were at Main Road at the time, weren't you? Or wherever it might have been.
Well, yeah, I mean, Reggiana, it wasn't that long ago that the Reggiana were much further up the footballing hierarchy in Italy than they are now. But a quick look, I'm going to declare an interest, and that is that I've had to have a look at the Serie C table right now. And it's we often talk about how in England there are so many clubs that formerly of the Premier League that are now occupying the lower reaches of the third division, League One particularly. There seem to be half the teams there have played in the Premier League in the last 25 years or so. And that's the same in Italy as well. I mean, just having a look, and this is only one region of the third division in Italy. Lecce are currently top of the league. Catania are there, and it's a strange concoction really, as European lower leagues often are, of great clubs, big clubs, formerly full of glory, I suppose, and young teams as well. Juve, Stabia, and teams like that. So it's a strange concept, I think, for most of us, involved in English football. In terms of American sportsmen, coming over and buying European teams, I can't think of any, to be perfectly honest. But we've seen a real rise in the last decade or so with the Glazers and, with Fenway Sports Group at Liverpool and Villa were taken over by Americans too. And I think that, there's a real risk, I think, for Americans out of their comfort zone coming over to Europe and getting involved in European football, where you don't have that guarantee of being in the top flight every season. I know it's a huge discussion at the moment with the US presidential elections, the football presidential elections, that is, with promotion and relegation. But we have seen, American businessmen, very, very rich American businessmen coming over and looking to exploit the riches in European football. But I suppose we're not, only a generation ago, really, you would have struggled even as a top sportsman anywhere in the world to be able to come over and buy a European football club. The figures would be beyond most, but I'm sure it's something that we'll see more of going forward with the huge amounts of money involved particularly in American sports.
And Daniel, I don't know if you're happy with that or whether you'd like to ask Paul a sub-question on the Italian third division, just so that he can flex his skills.
I was hoping if I could ask a cheeky sub-question, if that's okay with you.
Go on.
Okay. The English team that I support is Arsenal, and I've so-called been supporting them, from abroad since I think 2001, 2002 was kind of when I learned about them and first saw the highlights and games were just starting to come on TV here, at least easy to find in the States. But one of the things that simultaneously impresses me and drives me insane is Arsene Wenger's relationship with players, and how, for example, here in America, we went through Jurgen Klinsmann as the U.S. men's national team coach, and after his time at Bayern Munich, Philipp Lahm wrote in his book about how horrible the training sessions were, and there have been similar reports in the media about how there was no tactical plan, nothing prepared for Klinsmann. He just said, "Go out and play hard," and it's sometimes it seems like we hear that the same thing said about Arsene Wenger, that he's way more into the person and way more into just motivating you as opposed to actually having like a tactical setup and working on defensively how to guard against X player or this kind of formation. And I saw Francis Coquelin's heard his interview on the World Service last week, and how a guy who is at Arsenal for 10 years and he just got pushed out, he's not even good enough to play in the midfield and just left in January, is still full of praise for Arsene Wenger. You'd think here's a guy who for sure would have, a little bit of anger or resentment for not getting a chance this year, and instead, he's back in the man that so many fans, hate and want out. And I was just curious if, in both Tim and Paul's region, if there are any other managers who have this kind of relationship with their players that even after the player leaves, they can't help but back the manager.
Of course, we should ask Sanchez for his thoughts first of all before we go to Tim and Paul, shouldn't we? Tim, do you want to come in there?
Well, see, I wonder whether, and this is one that I'll ping back to Paul because he's far, far closer to this than I am, but I wonder whether if there was a problem between Sanchez and Arsenal, it's a problem with the club and not the problem with the coach. I wonder what the club, Arsenal's priorities are. I wonder if it's a club which is being run as a business rather than a club which is being run with the ambition of winning trophies. Football is a strange business for that reason. Usually the objective is to win trophies, and there's very, very little money to be made from it. You just wonder if at Arsenal the priorities are a little bit different, and it's that's put a strain on his relationship with the club, and it's that's led him to want to leave.
What about in South America? What about the relationship?
Well, yeah, this is a current debate in South America about the current national team coach, Chichi, who's revolutionised the Brazilian national team. When he took over, after a third of the World Cup qualification campaign, Brazil were in sixth outside the qualification places, with basically the same group of players, and he got them through 10 wins and 2 draws in fine style. And a lot of people over here are saying, what he is a man motivator. He's someone who is able to establish a relationship with the players on an individual basis and so on. I think that this, obviously man management is clearly part of it, but I think this is when this is said about a coach, it is a little bit insulting, because you could be the greatest bloke ever, and you could worry about the fellow's family and whatever. As soon as a tactical question comes up and you haven't got the answer, instantly you lose the credibility of the dressing room. And it doesn't matter how great a bloke you are. Quite often, the strength of the human relations comes from the fact that the players believe in what the coach is telling them. And the players believe that if they follow what the coach asks them to do, then their possibilities of winning and gaining glory and financial returns and so on are heightened. So for me, the two go absolutely together. I never like to see this kind of man-motivated thing in isolation from tactical knowledge, because if you haven't got that tactical knowledge and, you're trying to explain to the players what you want them to do. And who told me this was Mario Zagallo, the great Brazilian coach. He said, the first time that a player says, well, what do I do now? What do I do if the opposing fullback does this? What do I do? If you haven't got an answer, you've lost them instantly. So for me, that there is no excellent man management and motivator without a solid tactical plan that the players believe in.
Well said, actually. That's interesting the way you put that across. What about in Europe, Paul? Is it any different from that, do you think?
Yeah, of course. Of course it is, and you know it's curious, really. I mean, football reflects real life, you know, as any industry does, and I think what sets Arsene Wenger apart is probably the fact that, you know, he is renowned for taking young players, for going to, rather than looking to buy, you know, established stars, mainly I think because of the move from Highbury to the new stadium. And also the financial restrictions the club have imposed, and
he was doing it before the move to the stadium.
He was, yeah. I mean,
he up the likes of Nicholas and Elka,
yeah,
and all that, yeah.
And he takes fringe players also. I mean, Thierry Henry, one of the greatest players that Arsenal ever had. But before he got to Arsenal, he was at Juventus playing on the wing and playing very, very infrequently. So I think that, you know, he instills belief in his players. And also, you know, you said it yourself, Daniel, Coquelin had been at Arsenal for a decade. Now, he's only 26. So he came from France as a 16-year-old. He probably saw Arsene Wenger as a father figure. He made that move easy for him. He made him feel valued. It's not like the majority of managers who buy a player, and if they don't do it, they're moved on almost as soon as they get there, you know. So, look, people react to different things, I think. And when you have played for Barcelona and you've won everything there is to win, as Alexis Sanchez had, to then go to a club that, yes, promised him and gave him more time on the pitch, but the ambition of the club was far lower than he had come from. That's difficult. It's difficult to reconcile yourself with that kind of thing. And I think that in Mourinho, he has somebody who is seen, certainly his media persona is somebody who is much less personable, but much more driven to succeed. And I think that tactically... go on. Tactically, Arsene Wenger changed the game in England. When he came here, if you look at there was Bruce Rioch in between, but Arsenal went essentially from George Graham to Arsene Wenger. You couldn't get more polar opposites in terms of footballing style. And the problem for Arsene Wenger is
it's different.
Everybody caught up. Yeah. And Arsene Wenger now is in a situation where he's much more reactionary to being the trailblazer that he was a generation ago when he arrived.
When you talk about George Graham to Arsene Wenger, I'm thinking, isn't that generational? Isn't it the fact that George Graham's generation didn't have all the access to the kind of or knowledge of the kind of training that Arsene Wenger would have been well known for nowadays? Just like Arsene Wenger seems to have fallen behind the current generation of managers as well.
Yeah, I mean, there is an element of that to it, but it was so revolutionary that it wasn't just a generational divide. It was more to do with a footballing culture, a more advanced and a more sophisticated footballing culture. I mean, he came from Japan, from Nagoya Grampus, Wenger, but I'm talking about his development on the continent. You know, he grew up in Alsace-Lorraine. He had Belgian football and German football and Italian football on his doorstep. So he had a combination of styles throughout his youth to bolster his footballing education. And obviously, he's an exceptionally intelligent man. He's slightly offish with the media for the most part, but who wouldn't be when you're asked the same question over and over again?
I don't know if you remember, Tim, because had you gone to Brazil when Arsene Wenger?
I had.
Yeah, because I remember on the other side of North London, people thinking, well, this is a laugh. You know, the idea that this gangly bloke with glasses came over from Japan and everything, we thought... in the Tottenham side of North London, they thought that, you know, they'd wipe the floor with Arsenal in the future.
And if the Tottenham side of North London thought that, they were very wrong. And when he was coach of Monaco, he was coach of Monaco in the kind of mid to late 80s, and he brought his Monaco side to White Hart Lane for a friendly. And they just wiped the floor with us. It was 4-0. It was like, what on earth is happening here? So I remember one of the Arsenal players then saying that, you know, the groups of people that Wenger brought in and they should be grateful to play for Arsenal because they were unknown beforehand. And it made me think, well, they were unknown to who? You know, just because you didn't know them doesn't mean they were unknown. You know, just because you didn't know Arsene Wenger when he came doesn't mean he was unknown.
No, I know. But when Paul says there about how everybody, Arsene Wenger was this highly intelligent coach, it was an era when it wasn't about intelligence, as I remember in any case. It wasn't about being the smartest coach, on the pitch, was it? You know, we weren't. Nobody was talking about intelligence.
The great tradition of English coaching. When you lose, close the dressing room door and yell and swear at them for 2 hours. That's the great tradition of English coaching.
That's why Harry Bassett was England manager, you might remember from the movie. Daniel, thanks a lot for that call as well. Clive in the wonderful town of Hemel Hempstead. Do you want to declare an interest, Phil, Tim Vickery?
Oh, you're making a happy man very old. It's land of these chilling
glory.
vistas spawned myself. Yeah. I got very angry once. It was during the Olympics. And I was on Radio 5 during the Olympics, and just before they came to me, the gymnast, Max Whitlock, one of the presenters said, and Hemel Hempstead's finest. And I said, well, hang on. I thought I was in the shout for that one, but apparently not. Apparently you got to be a gymnast.
Yeah, well, there you go. You never mind. Did Sir John Betjeman ever do a poem about Hemel Hempstead?
No.
Are you sure?
No, he didn't.
So that one, come friendly bombs and drop on Hemel, that wasn't about Hemel Hempstead?
No, well, that's Slough.
It's close, isn't it? Close. You see, if you were...
I don't know. I think Slough's a bit older. Hemel is Newtown.
Yeah,
classic, modernist Newtown. Kind of concrete and glass. That's and most people's experience of school is old, drafty buildings. My experience of school is kind of modern, almost prefab things. Lots of glass.
And look at you now.
Froze in winter.
And look at you now.
Yeah, you froze in winter. You roasted in summer. But that made an adult of you.
It got you to Rio, didn't it? Clive in the wonderful town of Hemel Hempstead says, rather than bringing on a spare keeper for the time the keeper is injured, I think it would be better if one of the outfield players put on a keeper's jersey whilst their keeper tried to waste time. But then, it would be all kinds of questions as, was he really wasting time? It would be embarrassing for the referee if the keeper then shows him a broken finger, wouldn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and how long would the player take to change his shirt and get the gloves on? It would be a humongous time wasting exercise.
He could have had his finger reset in that time.
Well, he can waste as much time as he likes. We're looking at the hat trick that will be scored in the 3 minutes before the other keeper's brought back on. Is what we're thinking of. Okay, lots to get through. We've got Jake in West Sussex with us. Good morning, Jake.
Unless, hang on a minute.
Hang on,
Brazilian
Jake. Hang
TV
on. For goodness sake, please.
They're just showing the dog.
Oh, the dog is back on the agenda.
No, he's not back on, but they've picked that out as one of the highlights of the night. They are just showing the dog.
Right, okay. Yeah.
The dog is up there with the goals of the evening.
It must be.
That's priorities for you.
It must be an exciting match to watch. Woof, woof.
My brother Jake, I apologise.
Ah.
No, you're very welcome. You're fine.
I was going to go for another song about Jake, but I won't. Anyway, go on.
Good evening, guys, or good morning, I suppose.
Good morning to you. Yeah.
I have a question. Now, Tim, you have often said on the show about young Brazilian players going to Europe earlier than I guess 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I guess Malcolm, who you've mentioned in the last few weeks, who's been linked with Spurs and Arsenal and everything, I think he's about 21, and suddenly he's kind of been thrust into the limelight because of his possible move. Are the Brazilian media really concerned, kind of in the same way that you are, about the young Brazilian talent going abroad so early?
Good question.
I think that's
a good question.
Because I agree with Tim. That would concern me. But is the mainstream Brazilian sports media concerned about it?
It's a great question, and I don't think they're nearly as concerned about it as they should be. It's almost like they'll work with the raw materials that they have. So, all right, if all of these players have gone, all right, they've gone. Okay, so these are the players that we've got. So these are the players that we're going to big up. I wrote a piece on the World Soccer website the weekend that the way that Brazilian football is set up at the moment, the calendar, is organised in such a chaotic, such a stupid way that it's almost guaranteed to fail. And I fear that that's part of design. That's not just anarchic chaos. I think there are plenty of people inside the game who want it to fail. Now, why do they want it to fail? Because Brazilian football has become an export industry, and there's lots of money to be made from selling players to Europe. And when there's opportunities to sell players, there's also opportunities for money to disappear into private bank accounts. You can make money legitimately if you're an agent or someone, but you can also, and it happens, you can make money illicitly. With kickbacks and so on, and this is I'm genuinely really concerned about the future of the game here. When you think back, say 10 years ago, at that point Brazil's economy was booming, Europe was in real economic problems, and Brazil was investing in to stage a World Cup. And you can find one even in a really wonderful book like Soccernomics by Simon Cooper, an economist with a Polish name I can never remember. It's a fantastic book, and if you read that book, it's published about 10 years ago, you see that Iceland are going to be a power in football. That's how good that book is. But even a book as intelligent as that is saying that, look at these trends, and in a few years Brazilian football is going to be at the same level as European club football. Instead of which the gap has just got wider and wider and wider. And I'm almost at a loss about what's going to happen now, because we've had the economic boom, that's well and truly gone. We've had the World Cup, that's well and truly gone. And the gap between European football still gets wider and wider and wider. More players going. It was nearly 2,000 players left Brazil last year. It was 18% up on the year before. I think there should be more alarm about the fact that domestic football here, I don't think it's ever been worse. So the national team is one thing. The national team at the moment are terrific. They've got a great coach, and Brazil continues to produce terrific players. Now, what's the ideal age to bring them over? That's a difficult one. And firstly, because there is no ideal age. Human beings are different and no one size fits all. But I was very struck to read, not that long ago, there's a German company that specialises in spotting Brazilian talent and taking it over. I think they were involved in taking Firmino over to Germany and Luis Gustavo, the holding midfielder from the last World Cup. And they're saying that they think that although there are risks of taking the youngster over as early as possible, there are obviously risks to that in terms of his development as a human being, going to a different culture with a different language. They think that in general, in footballing terms, you want to get him out as soon as possible, because the standard of play in Brazil now, in comparison with Europe, is much lower. The ideas there's a paucity of ideas, and so if you want him to develop as a player, you want to get him out quickly, and then you've got a combination of Brazilian flair and European organisation, and that might well be correct, and that's dreadful. It's absolutely dreadful for the future of the domestic game here, and also what we've seen is. Young footballers, young promising youngsters who are playing football in the full meaning of the word play. I'm talking kids 8 to maybe 12 years old. When I spoke to that age range, say 20 years ago, their dream was to play for the local side. Now their dream is to play for Real Madrid or Barcelona, or maybe Manchester United or someone like that, but especially Real Madrid and Barcelona. And I'm not sure how you get that genie back in the box. I'm not sure how you win back lost terrain. So I'm genuinely worried, really concerned, and I think that the Brazilian media should be much, much more concerned than it is. But one of the problems with football reporting is there's always a next game. So, it's hard for the journalists and the media as well to think long term, because you're thinking, tomorrow there's a big local derby, so let's go and report the big local derby. And that fact that there's always a game coming up, sometimes that stops you sitting down and thinking about long-term factors and where we're going and where we'll be in 10 years from now.
Jake, thank you very much for the question. I'm going to get a European perspective on that to a certain extent from Paul. By the way, it was Stefan Szymanski.
Well done.
Yeah,
well
I try. And Paul, although, and I can see why I think it's such a great question, is because it takes us into sort of the cultural aspect of football from all over the world. Whereas people in Brazil and Brazilian journalists may see the export of young players to Europe from a more sort of pragmatic perspective, that, look, these people, this is their opportunity to go overseas, the opportunity of a lifetime that they maybe wouldn't get, or probably wouldn't get if they stayed in Brazil. Although, you know, I get Tim's existentialist point of view, if they could only wait a year or two. But then again, we're talking about people who are perhaps more needy or desperate for money, etc. In the same way, the whole tranche loads of people came over from Africa and the Caribbean to this country in the 1960s with young children, giving their children an opportunity that they wouldn't have had back home. It was more of a kind of necessity to give them that opportunity, even though if they had waited in their home countries for a couple of more years and established themselves, and perhaps have been strengthened in other ways as such. What about in Europe, where it's not the narrative isn't necessarily as poor, as desperate as it is in South America? Do you find people leaving their home countries too young? And what do the local journalists, what's their perspective as opposed to your perspective as a British sports journalist?
Well, I mean, you've worded it beautifully, Dotun, but I was going to look at the Brazilian question from the European perspective, but we can get to that.
No.
Look, I mean,
like
you said about, you know, Africa and Caribbean immigration in the 60s. It wasn't just from there; it was from Ireland too. I mean, my mum came from Ireland to escape very similar social conditions. So, you know, We've had a situation in European football where Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid, Barcelona have all been banned from being able to register new transfers because of what UEFA said was exploitative transfer policies in essentially signing children from overseas. Now, it brought in EU legislation where only members, only 16 to 18-year-olds from EU member states are able to move within the European Union, and those outside have to wait until they're 18 years old, which is also the case for Brazilian players, not allowed to leave until they're 18. Now, I get why it's such a big issue for Tim in Brazil in terms of the quality of the domestic game. And also, I think that you're being a bit kind, Dotun. I don't think that these people whose motivation it is to make money from excellent young footballers, I don't think they see it as, oh, well, your 14 or 15-year-old son might miss an opportunity, you know, to live their dream. They see it as them likely to miss out on a huge payday.
Yeah,
and
I was thinking about from the journalist point of view. The journalist is more pragmatic, if you like, and more understanding of the motivation of the families, for example.
Of course, absolutely. And you know, I think that, yeah, I mean, it is a good point. And I think a lot of it is down to the individual. We've seen Gabriel Jesus come to Manchester to play for City and thrive. We saw Gabriel Barbosa, similar age, move to Italy, and it's not worked out, and he's just been loaned back. So
you've got to declare an interest in that. Come on. One bloke thrives and the other bloke, it doesn't work out. You could have chosen so many other examples. Declare your interest.
No, but I couldn't because this is the perfect example. They came over at the same time, pretty much. They've come to similar stature of clubs. They're a similar age. They had similar experiences domestically, continentally, and internationally. So it's a very good example. Thank you very much.
You got away with that one. You got by the skin of your teeth.
It's not my fault that City signed a good one. Yeah, I mean, it is a huge issue, and for domestic football, not just in Brazil, but all across South America.
Isn't it the case, though? Because I heard from a woman yesterday who is a manager, who's a music manager in the music industry, you know. In fact, she told me an interesting story. She's taking Idris Elba, who you know is making the movie of my first book, Yardi. Well, the first book I published.
I didn't know that.
The first book I published, Yardi. Yeah. Oh, it's coming out this year. It's coming out in the next few weeks. It's coming out in the next few weeks, actually.
Fantastic. Are you flying us all back for the premiere?
Yeah, well, you know I will. Yeah, in your dreams. I'll be happy if I get a ticket myself to the premiere. Anyway, but the point is, he's going over to Malaysia.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say. It took 25 years to the day, or at least to the month, that I published a book for them to finally...
It's a huge book.
It was
huge book.
in its day. Only 192 pages, but you mean huge in another way, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
but actually, I shouldn't tell you the thing about Idris Elba. Let me leave that to one side. But she said to me that her problem in the music industry is when she signs people who are under 18, those contracts are not as valid as you think they are, because actually you're either signing the contracts with the parents, and actually the parent is not the talent. So somebody else can come along and say, well, stuff them, I'll give you another contract. You can walk away from the contracts because essentially you've got a contract with somebody who's underage. Is that not the same in football? That any other club could come along and say, okay, you've got to deal with Barcelona, but hang on, we'll offer you, your parents or whatever it is, more to come over to Real Madrid, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean,
it's something that the clubs really complain about here is the duration of the contract, because they can sign them like 15, they can sign them up for 3 years. Then at 18,
is it a valid
either
contract?
Got to give them,
is it a valid contract?
yeah, right. But they can't leave abroad to Europe before 18, as Paul said. But then at 18, you've got to make a decision, because let's say a European club wants them, so. You've either got to give them a huge contract before you really know what they're going to become, or you might lose them for nothing. You might lose all of that investment that you've made in them. So there's a desire. What the clubs would like is to be able to have them under lock and key until they're 21. And the clubs here are reacting a little bit, and maybe it is possibly true that the pendulum has gone too much the other way. And there's no doubt that before there was freedom of contract, the players were treated absolutely disgracefully, and that's all over the world. I mean, we just lost dear old Jimmy Armfield, who spent his life playing for Blackpool, but I don't think he probably really wanted to. Johnny Haynes certainly didn't want to spend all of his career playing for Fulham. He wanted to go to Tottenham. But you couldn't because, or Tom Finney, as we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, you couldn't because the clubs had you for life. And clearly that was wrong. And maybe in terms of player formation, we may have gone too far the other way. And now the clubs who invest in the players and spend money and time producing those players, perhaps their legal position needs to be protected a little bit better.
Okay, lots to get through and lots of texts here that we haven't gone through. If I might throw, can we have a quick fire round? Do you mind, guys?
No, go for it.
It's a really interesting one that I wanted to bring up earlier, and I think we could talk much longer about this. Feel free to take it where you want to. John in Banniffshire in Scotland says, do the guys think there's an actual skill in heading the ball into the net? E.g., would they know or guess the trajectory of the ball, allowing for conditions, etc.? I mean, I couldn't see where he's going with this, because sometimes you see players sort of closing their eyes as the ball comes and just hoping that it hits somewhere in that huge goal mouth rather than goes over the top or hits the bar. A skill, Paul?
Definite skill. Of course it's a skill, absolutely. It's about timing of your jump. It's about... often it's about doing the unexpected and, looking to go back across the face of the goalkeeper using the power of the ball. There's a glancing header, a flicked header, it's as valid a skill as, in terms of a striker or a defender scoring from a corner or a set piece or from open play. A defensive header, very often it's just, you half got your eye on the player who's invariably backing into you, and half got your eye on the ball, and you're just looking to get it away from goal. But yeah, I mean, of course it's a skill.
Having said that, though, the game is called football, Tim, football, and there is an element of luck in heading the ball, isn't there?
Well, there's an element of luck in kicking the ball as well. Sometimes, a missed kick can be the greatest shot known to man because it confuses the goalkeeper. But there's no doubt that it's a technique. Neck muscles, for example, use of neck muscles. It's a technique every much as kicking the ball is a technique. And as Paul said, when look at the difference between a defensive header when you're looking to get the ball up and away, and an attacking header where you're usually looking to get the ball down. They're very different techniques and they need to be trained.
And Stuart in Paisley wants to know if Gremio's Luan is good enough to play in Europe, and if so, where can you see him going?
Well, there's been rumours again with Liverpool, and you could see him, being a good investment for some, by no means all, by no means even most of the Felipe Coutinho money. He's a very elegant player, very intelligent player, gets in that space between the lines so well, between the opposing defence and midfield, and he's versatile and talented, and he's getting to the age now, about 24, when he really wants to go, I think, but he wants to go somewhere big. He doesn't want to go necessarily to Ukraine or Russia. He's rejected that already. So he's holding out for something bigger. I understand that there is just a little bit of question mark about what he gets up to off the field, which is amazing because you look at him and he looks like a choir boy. But I understand that, as someone really in the know said, his night can be a little bit long at times. So maybe that's putting people off.
I know exactly where he's coming from with that one, mate. I have the same problem, especially when I'm presenting this programme. Michael says, I'd like to ask your experts, how will Tevez be remembered in Europe and in his on his return to Boca has his return to Boca been something to celebrate for the fans? And will he get a chance to play at the World Cup, or is it too late for him? Also, did River Plate try to approach Mascherano about coming back? So how would he be remembered in Europe then, Paul Tevez, Carlos Tevez?
Well, I think it depends on where in Europe. I think in Italy he'll probably be remembered as somebody who didn't quite cut it to the standards that would have been expected. I think in England with United, United supporters will remember him as maybe the one that got away. He wanted to stay at United, and various things happened. He ended up across the city at City. At City, he'll be remembered for the things that he helped the club win, but also for his six months. Hang on.
Lest you have to declare another interest. Careful.
6 months. I think I've declared it enough. People realise.
Well, now it's North or one side of Manchester versus the other, or Manchester versus Salford now, isn't it?
That's more like it. But anyway, more to the point. I think he'll be remembered for his 6 month sabbatical, under Mancini when he went back to Argentina. However, I think it's important to try and differentiate the footballer from the man here. And I think as a footballer, he is sensational. I think as a man, I empathise with him hugely because he's clearly a real homebody. And when he has this incredible talent that has seen him play around the world, and all he ever really wanted to do was stay at home. And, I can sympathise with that. I think it's quite a human trait, and I think it softens the other issues, that people may have had with him as a player. My personal opinion, of course.
But from a South American perspective, Tim, I mean, from my perspective, when he came over here with Mascherano, it was embroiled in all sorts of controversy about how the transfer was being done, and that's how I remember him as much as anything else. For the player before the player that we saw on the field.
Yeah, I mean, he's almost a religious icon at Boca Juniors. And just to carry on from Paul's thing about him being a homebody, he moans when he's at home as well. He's just a moaner, He's one of those people for whom the glass is always half empty. And it's a little bit dirty, please, and could he have a different glass? And he's never been happy anywhere, I think. The first time he left Boca, when he went to Corinthians in Brazil, before coming to West Ham, he was saying, I can't stand it here any longer, I've got to get out, I've got to go. In a bit, he'll be moaning again about being back at Boca. Why is he so revered? Well, part of it is his biography. There's so many similarities with Maradona in the stocky build and in his poverty to prestige biography. He comes from a neighbourhood of Buenos Aires so violent that it's colloquially known as Fort Apache. He goes back there and he wears that very openly. The scars that he has on his neck, he wears them openly. He's been spoilt rotten in Argentina. In terms of the World Cup, he shouldn't be anywhere near. His international record is terrible. He's just had a year when he said, disgracefully, I thought, he's been on holiday in China. He doesn't have the pace to play as a centre forward anymore. But on his presentation, when he went back, that was one of the questions the Argentine journalists were asking. What about playing in another World Cup? So he's so spoilt that they're trying to shoehorn him into the World Cup team. But if there's any sense and justice in the world, I don't think he'll go.
Well, talking of Fort Apache, remember Junior Delgado's Fort Augustus? Like the birds in the trees, the prisoners, they must be free. Fort Augustus, one of the hardcore prisons in Jamaica. I wouldn't want to go there. Fort Augustus! Paul Sarahs, our Galatasaray, is here with us, answering any questions or comments you have on European football and players from over there playing in our leagues. And Tim Vickery, the Legendino, is in Rio taking care of any questions and comments you've got on football from South American players from over there playing in our leagues. Let's go straight to a call. We've got Joel in Birmingham. Joel, good morning.
Good morning, Don.
Becoming something of a regular, aren't you, on this phone?
Well, I try my best. When I'm awake, I'll ring in.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're awake this morning.
Yeah.
You're a student, what? You're studying at Birmingham University, aren't you?
Yeah, Birmingham University. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And I don't suppose you want Tim to do his black country accent again. You always ask him to do it because it cracks you up, doesn't it?
The one time I asked, but no, maybe later on. Who knows?
Oh, you can ask him later on?
Yeah, maybe.
Is there any accent that you'd like Paul Sarahs to do? Whilst we've got him on, whilst he declares an interest, he knows the difference between Manchester and Salford.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he could do his Scouse accent for us. Who knows?
Paul, I didn't know you did one, Paul. Paul, I didn't know you did a Scouse. Paul? Oh, have we lost him? Oh, that's a shame. We'll get him back on in a second. Oh, well, at least Tim says.
Sorry,
you've got
Don.
a question. Oh,
I'm here now, but I didn't hear the question conveniently.
But how many sugars have you put in that cup of tea that you just made?
How did you know that?
0-10. First of all, Mina Rizuki, and now Paul Sarahs. It's always the European football correspondents that go off and leave us to do our own thing. Meanwhile, Joel, our caller this morning, is asking whether you could do your Scouse. And apparently you've got you do a proper Scouse that will make sure that you're barred from ever visiting Liverpool ever again.
Well, as my interest has been declared as a Manchester City supporter, that's the last thing I'm going to do. Thanks very much.
It's not Manchester City. It's sit there. Sit there.
It's my radio voice, Don.
Okay. So you've got a question, Joel. Don't allow me to stop you.
Yeah, so this one's for Paul Sarahs. I was thinking that West Ham have made an interesting signing in the last few days. They're thinking of bringing in João Mario on loan from... I think it's from Inter Milan. He was bought in the summer of 2016, I think, after the Euros. And I was just wondering what you think he'll do in the Premier League. They tried to buy William Carvalho in the summer, and it didn't come off. Another Portuguese central midfielder. So, just wondering how he'll do in the Premier League, possibly.
Well, I mean, he went for big money in 2016 after the Euros, and I think he was seen as a cure for many ills for Inter, and it never really worked out for him. I think he struggled really to adapt to the tactical nature of Serie A. Look, I'm not sure how he'll do, to be honest, because he's, so far in his career we've seen the great when he was back home in Portugal and the pretty poor for the most part since he's been at Inter. I think that it's a smart move from West Ham, because if they can get the first player out of him, then they've got an excellent player, and if they don't, well, they've not spent big money on him for him to fail again. So I think that injuries, Arnautovic and one or two others who are out for West Ham at the moment, I think he'll play a significant role, and I think it has been confirmed, hasn't it? Today or yesterday it was confirmed that he will be joining on loan. So from a West Ham perspective, they've not really got anything to lose and a lot to gain potentially. In terms of how he'll do, I mean, it depends on how much he's used the experience to learn, or whether he's become sort of demoralised by the fact that I think it was nearly £40 million that he went for in 2016. Whether that's affected his confidence to the point where it will take more than 3 or 4 months in the Premier League to get that back. But on his day, very, very good player indeed.
Jack, can we get rid of that caller, by the way, and move on? Yeah, can we move on to the next caller? That didn't come out on air, did it? Did that come out on air?
Don, could I have a sub question if that's all right?
Yeah. So, sorry. Yeah, go on, Joel. Sorry, apologies. Yeah.
I was just wondering, Tim and Paul. I was wondering how many biscuits did Dotun eat on the 20th anniversary show?
That's not even funny.
I've heard it's around 15.
That's not even funny.
Well, actually, I can deny those rumours, but don't ask him about how many of the Cornish pasties that were sent up fresh from Cornwall for him.
what
I'll
happens
put it
on
this way, I didn't see any of them.
For us.
what happens on the
For
20th?
us.
Yeah, what happens on the 20th anniversary program stays on the 20th anniversary program. Anyway, Joel, great. It's been great speaking to you. How come you sound even better than me? Are you a radio personality or something like that?
Not quite, but maybe one day. Who knows?
Well, one day. But how comes the line's so clear to Birmingham?
It's amazing.
Yeah, well, I
is.
am sat opposite you, Dotun.
Is that you?
Yes, I am.
Is that you?
indeed.
You're sitting opposite me.
I am indeed. Yes.
What? It's the same Joel from
same.
Birmingham.
Yeah,
that's
I
been
know.
calling for the last few
I'm
weeks.
like a celebrity, aren't I? It's just this.
You've been calling for a few weeks now, haven't you?
Well, I called 2 weeks ago and didn't manage to call in last week. But
So, how did you end up here?
well, you said that I should email you, so I did. And
I said that on air.
you said that on air.
No.
I know.
And what, you took my word for it?
I did, and I followed it up immediately.
And you didn't think I was just trying to get rid of you? When I said,
you probably were, but I don't know. I take you for your word, Don. So
okay,
I was straight there.
And so you're studying what?
So I do African studies.
African studies?
Yeah.
Well, you could tell me a little bit about Africa. It's a big continent, isn't it?
It's a big continent, yeah.
I haven't been there for a while. What's it like nowadays?
It's all right. I was in Zimbabwe for 7 weeks this summer. So
now you're showing off, aren't you?
I know.
You're showing off. You're trying to say you've seen more of Africa.
Yeah, well,
okay.
But no, so yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, and of course things have changed in Zimbabwe since you were there.
Indeed, they have. Yeah. It was,
And what's the football like there? Did you see?
I didn't get to see much. No, I was mainly. I watched a bit of cricket and rugby when I was out there.
Have you read any Zimbabwean history?
Not much, but my mum's a white Zimbabwean, so
Okay.
I know quite a lot.
I love when people say my mum's a white Zimbabwean.
Well, no, because people get
Rather than
confused.
what?
I don't, well,
rather than a white Rhodesian.
yeah, exactly, yeah. But no, so I've heard a lot of the history from relatives and stuff like that.
So why do you want to get into radio then?
Well, I want to get into radio because
It's not because of Tim Vickery like everybody else.
Sometimes he's got some valid opinions.
Not all of us who work in radio live and sun it up on the beaches of Copacabana.
No, I know. He's living the dream out there, isn't he?
This is rainy Salford you're in.
Yeah, I know.
It's not gonna be like that.
No, I just always love radio. I'm a massive sports fan, especially.
We're going to test you. We're gonna test you on your being. Okay, so you are our third pundit this morning, and let's see if you. Well, we'll throw some skills at him, shall we, gentlemen? Tim in Coventry, which isn't far.
Yep.
From where you
No,
are. You're part of the quick fire round now.
Yeah,
Tim
go
in
for it.
Coventry says, with the brief trial of VAR in England getting a mixed reception, what's been the reaction to it when trialled in our contributors' regions? First of all, Tommy, in the UK, what's been the reaction to it, would you say? Or at least at the University of Birmingham?
I think it's been mixed. Me and my friends who have watched the games, I think the Willian incident in the FA Cup replay against Norwich was farcical in terms of it was a definite foul and it was given as a dive, and then it went to VAR and they could see the contact, but it was still given as a dive and he was still booked. So there's some incidences, but then you've got the example of Iheanacho where he scored a goal, it was given offside, but they went to VAR and it worked. So I think the thing with VAR is what you've got to do is in subjective decisions it's really difficult to use because that's what creates great pub debates and debates around the sport. Is like, is it a penalty, is it not? But for not subjective things like, is it in the box, is it outside the box, offside, on onside, I think it's really useful, but it needs to be used in the right way.
I'm surprised you've been able to go to the pub for debates with all the student loans that you have to repay back. But Paul Sarahs, what's the reaction been in Europe to all of this?
It's been largely positive, I think, particularly in Italy. In Germany, look, in England, it's been. I think that you're being kind by saying that there's been a mixed reaction because I think the teething troubles. Was it last week that we spoke about this on the show? I'm not sure. You must have listened, Dotun, on your on the podcast as you weren't here last week.
No, I was listening live, mate. I was listening live, itching my finger over my phone buttons, but I didn't have the bravery to say I couldn't stay away. Anyway.
Well, you can tell you've been on earlier in the day, over the last week, Dotun, because you're very fair this evening. Normally not quite the case. The reaction here has been that it's been largely a disaster. I don't think that's hyperbole to say that. I think it doesn't seem that the referees Look, and it might all be teething troubles, who knows, but it doesn't seem that the referees are particularly au fait with how they should be using it for the things that they should be using it for. There are very set criteria for the instances which you're allowed to go to the video assistant referee.
And Tim?
I think that...
Go on. Finish your point, Paul. Sorry, I'm
just
still being fair.
Look, I think that the people in charge need to get it right before the World Cup in the summer, because if it's the VAR that we're currently seeing in English football, it's going to be a disaster for the World Cup. And as FIFA's flagship tournament / moneymaker, I think it is absolutely imperative that they get it right.
And Tim, South America was?
Well, it's still very early here. It hasn't been used a great deal, but already people are seeing that it's going to be much, much more complicated than maybe they thought. And there's a kind of nerdish tendency over here, a kind of love of technology. And people who've been really pushing it have treated it as if it's going to be an absolute panacea. It's going to solve all problems. And I think we've already seen that that's not the case. It's a system which has a great deal to offer, but the use of it can be problematic and can end up causing as many problems as it solves. So there's a little bit chastened, I think, that those people who've been pushing it so much, seeing that in practice it's going to be more complicated.
And talking of the World Cup that Paul mentioned a moment ago, imagine if there was a World Cup not of nations, but of regions in nations. Have a listen to this.
Having had our passports and visas checked just south of the Sheffield border, we have finally arrived at a small ground in Hemsworth. Frost is covering the pitch, but that has not stopped the 40 triallists coming out here today for the chance to represent their county internationally. The brains behind the idea is Phil Hegarty, a warehouse coordinator by day and international chairman by night. He remembers how it all started.
I think there have been many conversations down pubs over the years in Yorkshire about what a Yorkshire team would look like. It kind of all came about especially this year because of a couple of articles I read about CNIFA, and then realising that, yeah, that's something we could do. Why not? Let's do it.
CNIFA is an alternative international governing body to FIFA that was set up in 2013. It gives nations and independent zones the chance to play international football. Competitions take place each year, with the CNIFA World Cup being held in London this June. Some of the teams include Abzaka of Georgia, who won the last World Cup, Donetsk of Ukraine and Padania of Italy. And now, Yorkshire. The White Rose qualified through a number of different factors, including having its own non-Germanic language. The Yorkshire dialect song, On Ilkley Moor Bar Tat, helped the team's bid.
Got Ilkley Moor by Tat is the unofficial anthem. And then we started thinking, well, is that appropriate? You know, there's references to cannibalism and cross-jostling and all kinds in Ilkley Moor Bar Tat. So we started looking elsewhere for maybe writing new lyrics to the tune or a completely different thing. But we came full circle, and in the end, Ilkley Moor Bar Tat has been used as the national anthem, with some verses excluded.
But it was the spirit of Yorkshire that really helped the application for membership.
There is a really, really strong identity, and that's formed part of our application for CNIFA membership. I don't think every person in Yorkshire knows why they're so proud to be from Yorkshire, but that identity is there, and there are real reasons for it historically.
One person who shows this passion is head coach Ryan Farrell, a born and bred Yorkshireman who has had vast experience in the semi-professional scene. Ryan is the current youth academy coach at Bradford City and has also spent time coaching in Mexico City. He's drawing on that experience to help him pick his team for the Ellen Vannin game on the 28th.
We're looking for players to apply themselves in the right manner, stick to the morals of the Yorkshire folk in terms of how Phil wants the players to act and how to play, having that grit and determination. It'd be a proud moment for me to lead the Yorkshire team out on the first game, so really excited.
It won't just be a proud moment for Ryan, but it will be a proud moment for the whole of Yorkshire. But most of all, it will be a proud moment for Phil. A year ago, his idea of Yorkshire playing international football seemed impossible. However, on the 28th, he will watch his players take on Ellen Vannin from the Isle of Man in what will be a battle of the Vikings.
I can't wait. I can't wait to see all those guys out in the Yorkshire jerseys. There are so many reasons why this is a good thing, and we're stood here at Hemsworth in the heart of what used to be, mining territory. And they've got a good community spirit around here and places like this in Yorkshire. But they've had hard times as well over the past couple of decades, and just bringing something like this to this kind of area it's a real buzz. It's good. It's something they deserve, and I'm really happy that I can help in some small way to just bring something a bit extra to this part of the world.
With World Cup success looking further and further away each time for the English national team, Yorkshire could step up to the plate and finally bring another World Cup back to the home of football. Isn't it fitting that the county with the oldest football club in the world could be triumphant for the whole country?
Indeed, and they might even win it. The Canifa World Football Cup draw takes place in northern Cyprus, and of course if Yorkshire win it, they'll be amongst other states represented by Canifa, which is the organisation, independent of FIFA at least, organisation that represents stateless countries, regions, and unaffiliated, as I say, minority groups and so on, for a World Cup. Would you watch it, Joel Dawson, who's with us here in the studio?
Yeah, well, my parents actually do live in Yorkshire, so they're Harrogate, the posh part of.
You're declaring an interest.
So I am declaring an interest. Yeah,
good,
but
it's good.
No, I think it's all good. It's all good fun. I think I probably would watch the real World Cup above it, but it would be a good laugh. I'm sure I'd enjoy it.
Paul Sarahs, could this sort of thing catch on? Do you think, region by region? Northern Cyprus itself would have its own team, of course, and then the Catalan region would have their team and so on.
Well, they do, Dotun. The Catalans have played many non-affiliated to UEFA or FIFA friendlies over the year, and all of the usual faces have represented them and have been very proud to do so. Same with the Basque Country.
So they've won. So they've won all their matches, have they? If it's the usual faces, if it's the Barcelona team.
I think they've played other similar. I mean, Kosovo have only recently been affiliated with UEFA. I believe that they played against Kosovo before. I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure. But Xavi and Busquets and Puyol and Piqué and all of these guys have played for Catalonia, and I think Guardiola did as well. And going back, it's been going for quite a long time. But I like the idea of the Canifa World Cup, and I'll certainly be going along in London the end of May, beginning of June, and I mean there are some greats. I think, as Joel said, it's good fun, but also it's an opportunity for maybe marginalised groups to have a bit of national pride. I mean, we for example, Tibet will be involved. Oh, yeah. And I know that's a political hot potato, but an opportunity for Tibetans to celebrate Tibet in a sporting sense. And, there have been issues in Cyprus over a number of years. And again, it's good. But also, Yorkshire is slightly, isn't it? I said last week, isn't it funny how, within 30 seconds of meeting somebody from Yorkshire, you know exactly where they're from. And there is real pride in that, and rightly so. But, I mean, I think it's great. Football is a world game, and it's not just FIFA's game. That's the point.
And from an American perspective, not just South American, I suppose North American, Central American as well. You can imagine a lot of these indigenous groups, Tim, like First Nation Canadians, or original Americans, or whatever you want to call it, and even maybe unreconstructed the South Will Rise Again team. You can imagine that suddenly emerging. What about in South America, though? Are there any groups, indigenous groups of Incas or whatever, or Aztecs or whatever it might be?
There are. Yeah? There are, and there are also regions. There are some regions with. I don't really watch a lot of it, to be honest. It's a little bit off my beaten track. But anything that allows football. Hang on, you were supposed to be covering South America. What's this bias against the Incas and the Aztecs? Come on, man! You say that you are the oracle of South American football, and now you're disclosing. I've never said that, but I tend to cover the professional game. Well, I would describe you as many things. I'm not sure you would agree with all of them. Anything that gives people the chance to feel represented and brings people together, I think is terrific. I wouldn't watch it over the normal World Cup, and I think at the time that it happens, all of us will be very, very busy with other things. But these regions, and there are regions over here with a fierce regional pride. I mean, in Brazil, the area which I always equate with Yorkshire is Rio Grande do Sul, the Gaúchos in the south of Brazil, who have a very, very distinct identity. Some of the northeastern states as well. Colombia is a country that, because of its geography, it's really cut into separate regions, and those regions have a fierce local pride. It's a pride that I've always enjoyed because I've always found it to be very, very inclusive. When you go to these regions of Colombia, it's like, this is what we've got, come and enjoy it. Not this is what we've got and it's ours, it ain't yours. But those regions like Antioquia, of the region of Medellin, very, very fierce regional pride. So I think they would probably be interested in the long term in taking part in some kind of competition like this.
Tim, I was just thinking, aren't there a couple of countries in South America that aren't affiliated with FIFA in the north of the region? Am I right in thinking that?
He wouldn't know because he only sticks to the Argentina and Brazil.
There are some who are affiliated to CONCACAF.
Okay.
And I think there's one island, but it's very much a CONCACAF thing, which is it Martinique, which is not affiliated to FIFA, which plays in the Gold Cup but doesn't play in the World Cup because it's not affiliated. Yeah. But like Guyana and Suriname, they're on the South American mainland, but they're affiliated to FIFA and also to John Arnold's region.
Yeah. So what have you called me, Tim? Be honest.
That one.
What have you called me?
It's a family show, but mainly Uncle D, I think.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. This one is from our listener, and feel free just to holler. We'll go quick fire round, so anybody who wants to answer this, feel free. Our listener is a saddened Arsenal fan, declares an interest. This is Barrett in Tolsbury, who's baking at the moment. Do the experts agree with Ian Wright, that there will be more... Yeah, that's what he's put here. It's not me doing that.
Yeah. Well, it's made for writing, isn't it? It's made for writing.
He says, do you agree with Ian Wright that there will be more and more players running down contracts like Sanchez for massive paydays rather than big transfer fees, for example, likes of Neymar? Or is this just a Premiership problem because of the money now being paid by TV deals? Or does this occur in the experts' respective leagues as well? Will we see more and more players running down, as he describes it, Sanchez running down the deal? Although it's not strictly like that, Paul, was it? Because it was Arsenal that refused to sell him in that respect. But nevertheless, the question is still there.
Yeah, well, I mean, since the Bosman ruling in '95, that's been the case. But before that, as Tim alluded to earlier, with these one club men from way back, the clubs had.
But the point he's making
too much power.
But the point this caller is, or this listener is making, that is about teams or players being able to run down their contracts so that they're essentially free agents and they'll earn more money as a sort of like weekly salary from teams if they don't have to pay huge transfer fees. That's what it's about.
Well, I'm sure it will, but it's a job. Playing football is a job, and if somebody offered you, Dotun, to double your salary and a nice signing on fee to move at the end of your contract or whatever.
I would stay true to Charlton Athletic. I would. What crazy question to ask. Anyway.
Can I just say something, Dotun? I think it's going to be. I think what will come into contracts more now in football will be release clauses, which will change the aspect of that. So players might sign a contract with these clubs for the long periods they have signed before. Like Coutinho signed a 5-year deal 6 months before he wanted to leave Liverpool, but he didn't put a release clause in his contract. And if he'd put a release clause in his contract, it wouldn't have been as astronomical as the fee that Barcelona had to pay, because at that time the market was still at a lower rate. And obviously the Neymar transfer broke that. So I think the thing that will come in is release clauses of a lower value than what they would be sold for normally.
I'll tell you what will come in the next half an hour. I think we should give this boy a Brazilian shirt name. What do you reckon? Kev McGrath, do you think Joe should get a Brazilian shirt name? I mean, he's come all the way up from Birmingham to be with us.
For that alone,
he should get a Brazilian shirt name. I think you should be able to know a little bit about football. What do you reckon?
You're asking me.
Yeah, I'm asking you. Of course I'm asking you.
Here's what I know about football. Listen. There it is.
Okay. Paul Sarahs then. Well done, you, Kev, for admitting that as well. I know just as much, by the way, as you can hear. Paul, does he have a Brazilian shirt name in the next half an hour or so?
Well, I think we need to get the big wheel on the line.
Yes, it's a good point. Good point. Let me
Probably
speak.
wrestling someone at the moment. That might be tough.
Whilst the big wheel is not here, I will take control. I will take responsibility for this. So big wheel keeps on turning. Tim, what about you? Brazilian shirt name? He's come all the way from Birmingham.
Yeah. Signed, sealed, delivered. Get it on.
Okay. So what we know about our guest here this morning, Joel Dowson, is that he's a student in African what?
African studies.
Oh, just African studies, yeah. Not African history, not African culture.
It's technically African studies with development.
Right, okay. Yeah. No, Africa must be free by 1983.
And sadly not.
Yeah, okay, I'm just checking which. Okay, so he's a student of African studies at the University of Birmingham. His mother's a white South African, which makes
Zimbabwean. Don't say South African.
I'm sorry.
Fiona Dowson will be very annoyed with you, Dotun.
I'm sorry, apologies. So his mother's a white Zimbabwean, which makes him a half a white Zimbabwean.
Indeed.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And the other half of him is black, of course. Or at least from the black countries, you see what I mean?
Zimbabwean.
Yeah. So, and anything else we should know about you that might help?
I'm a Leeds fan for my sins.
Oh, dear.
My dad's a vicar, if you want
Oh,
to know
whoa. I love it.
Interesting information.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, he's been very holy this evening.
Yeah. So that's about your lot. I'm not very interested.
So we need a Brazilian shirt name for him, and I know our listeners will contribute with the greatest Brazilian shirt names, one or two that he may not like, but those are the ones he probably get. Braminho. I'm not sure about that one. Braminho as a Brazilian football shirt name for our guest this morning, Joel Dowson. He's a vicar's boy. He's half white Zimbabwean. Don't ask me why. And he is at Birmingham University, and he is studying African studies, but also a long-time listener to World Football Phone-In as well, and contributor as well, by the way. So we're talking football in Europe and South America. We want a Brazilian shirt name for Joel. Give us your thoughts on that. In terms of football in Europe and South America, lots and lots of questions that we really need to rattle through as well. And apologies for keeping you waiting. Oh, by the way, Max has pointed out that Yorkshire have already got most of England's backline: Kyle Walker, Danny Rose, Harry Maguire and Gary Cahill. Without them, they are the West Ham of 1966, but nowadays, if you see what I mean. So this question for you, Tim, very quickly.
I thought Danny Rose came from Broadway.
I know, I knew you'd go for that one. Yeah. Well, it's not White Hart Lane Broadway, I'll tell you that. It's not Tottenham Broadway, I'll tell you that. You may not even be there. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a very good. I'll give you a full point for that one, mate. Yeah.
He was from the Leeds Academy, was Danny Rose, so he's one of ours. There you go.
You argue with Tim. I'm not getting in the middle. I'm not piggy. I'm not piggy in the middle, mate.
Yeah.
So
here I come.
Joel has no idea what you're referencing.
No, not a clue.
No reference at all. Okay, it's basically Barrington Levi.
Okay.
On the intercom, Rosie tell me to come. I'm broader than Broadway.
Dotun, you're singing again.
I'm trying. I'm not singing. Nobody would call it singing, apart from you, but very generous of you to suggest it was to. So this one is from Ben. I was wondering if the panelists saw the Leeds United
here we go.
new badge unveiling on social media this week that was met with disgust and huge no from most Leeds fans, and also a lot of mockery from fans of other teams. The club stated 10,000 people were consulted about the new badge. A petition was signed by at least 10,000 fans rather quickly to ban the badge. Luckily for Leeds fans, the club are rethinking the design. Anyway, it got me thinking, are there any decisions from clubs in the panelist regions that have upset the fans, leading to a huge backlash? And did owners / club carry on anyway or back down? You want to go with this one first, Joel? Declaring interest.
Yeah, this one hurt me. It looks like the guy's checking his watch, or he's the guy from the Gaviscon advert. Other products are available, obviously. But no, it looks like a fake badge that you get on like a just a computer game that doesn't have the proper licenses.
Why are they changing it? Why do they want to change it?
I don't know. Like Leeds have changed their badge quite a lot. Like this one isn't that old. I think it's only in maybe 20 to 30 years old. I think it's under new ownership. They might be thinking of trying to like reinvent the club a bit. I think it was not thought out properly. I think the white rose has been a key part of the crest for many years, and I think that's something that's quite that's irritated the Leeds fans that's no longer on it. Kind of turns attention away from one of the best games of the season as well that we had on Saturday. We actually lost 4-3. We were 2-0 down, a man sent off, came back to 3-2 up, and then we conceded 2 last-minute goals to lose 4-3. But no, I don't like it at all.
Yeah. Any situation like that you've come across in Europe, Paul?
Yeah, well, I mean, very, very famous one at Cardiff City when Vincent Tan came in and changed Cardiff's colours, the colour of the home kit from blue to red, and it lasted 3 years, and in the end he bowed down to fan pressure to change it back. So, yeah, I mean, these kinds of things are always met with resistance, particularly in Europe. I think there's such a rich historical element to many badges. I remember Swindon Town changed the badge, which was a take on the Swindon coat of arms, and it had a nod to the heritage of the railways in the town, and they came up. This was going back 25 years, maybe even more than that, and it looked like a supermarket logo, the new badge, and they changed it back in recent times, and I think everyone was much happier. I think modernising badges, club crests and things like that. I think it's a pretty reasonable thing to do, but it has to be in keeping with the rich local cultural heritage of the club, who represent an element of the town or the city that they're from. So these things are always met with resistance, almost always.
And Tim, what about South America?
Well, it doesn't really happen that much over here because, in fact, this is always an argument which is used against the kind of business model of football, because the clubs are like social membership clubs, so they don't have an owner. And one of the arguments always used against this idea of having an owner and running the club on business lines is, imagine if someone from the other side of the world came and changed our colours. Sometimes how it works, remember like Crystal Palace. And Crystal Palace used to be the Glaziers, and I think it was Malcolm Allison who rebranded them as the Eagles, and the fans referred to themselves as the Eagles, and that one seems to have worked. So despite the kind of latent conservatism of football fans, there are times when a rebranding exercise can be successful.
Okay. Just say a few more words from the Leeds fans. Why are they so upset?
I think it just takes away from all the tradition and history of the club, I think, and it's I think 10,000. If they've consulted these 10,000 people, I've no idea who they are. It doesn't seem to be the fans. It doesn't seem to be anyone who
from Lancashire, maybe.
Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it is all the Mancunians and all that wanting to stick one over on us again. But no, I think they should stick with the old one. There's nothing wrong with it, and I think Leeds should be focusing on matters on the pitch and getting back in the Premier League rather than designing a new crest and making a complete hash of it.
Reverendo, says Matt.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Well, you can't have that one.
Well, no. You're not having that at all. You never know that. Zimbabdino, Michael in Glasgow. And Joelino, says Mike. Yeah. So far, so good, yeah? You happy with that?
Yeah.
You happy with all those, yeah? Okay, we'll see which ones you'll end up with. Be careful what you say. You might regret it. So this question is for Tim about Alexis Sanchez and the fact that Chile not qualifying for the World Cup is a blessing in disguise for Sanchez and Manchester United. I'm sure you'd love to be at the World Cup playing, but considering the fact that he's been playing the Cup every summer for the last however many years, will this help him out with him getting a break and having a proper pre-season with Man United or not? Ask Pankaj in Aldershot.
No doubt about it. I'm sure he would love to play in what would be, I think, his final World Cup. I'm sure he'd love to do it, and that would be almost like a farewell, not only for him, but Arturo Vidal and this most successful Chilean generation ever. but they haven't made it. And part of the reason for them not making it is that thing of year after year after year. You know, World Cup 2014, Copa America 2015, all the way to the final. Copa America 2016, all the way to the final. Confederations Cup 2017, all the way to the final. So it's year after year after year without a proper rest. And for a player who leaves everything out there, it's hard to hold him back because he just wants to do so much. And that clearly must take a toll. So I think that makes him much, much more attractive from the point of view of Manchester United, that he can put his feet up and maybe kind of gently walk his dogs over the close season. And that was an element of the transfer that played quite big in Chile. What's going to happen to Alexis's two dogs? Who he loves so much. So hopefully
they're Alsatians, aren't they?
No, I don't think so. I think they're quite big.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got Eric with us in Canada, Toronto. Good morning, Eric.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks very much. That was a joke. Apologies. That was a bad joke as well. Wasn't even a good one.
Well, I was going to say, just first of all, thank you guys for the show. I've been listening. I'm not a native Canadian. I was listening to you in high school when I lived in Venezuela.
Wow.
Then I moved to the U.S.
Wow.
And I was listening through college, and now I'm in Canada working and living here, and it's been maybe like over 10 years, and the show's still great. You know?
Wow, I really appreciate that. Oh, Jay, well, great to have you with us. Well, why is it taking you 10 years to call us, though?
No, I've called once or twice before, so
Okay.
I'm on like every 3 years.
Every 3 years, okay. Gosh, I may not make the next one. Do you know what I mean? I'm off that.
No, you will.
Okay,
Don't worry.
okay. Let's just hope so.
I may not be there with you, but we as a people will get to the promised land.
Of course we will. Anyway, Eric, go ahead. You got a question?
Yeah, I have a question about Neymar. I don't know if you guys remember, there was the friendly game back in November versus Japan, and after the game, there was that press conference where he was crying over some questions that were put to him, and then he was crying on Chichi's shoulder, and it was this kind of, some people, I remember a former Scottish international, Craig Burley, saying it was the whole show, and it was all something put on for the cameras, but I do believe that South American players have that kind of father-son relationship with the coaches. I never see Harry Kane crying on Roy Hodgson's shoulder or anything like that. But my question is this: right now it's no secret that Neymar's kind of picking and choosing his games for PSG. So he's been called a part-time footballer and things like that. So I don't know if maybe you have this conspiracy theory where is this not a plan that maybe he hatched with Chichi to kind of save himself for the World Cup, just get to the World Cup pre-fit, and then, knowing how individualistic a person he is, I think he knows that if he has an amazing World Cup and Brazil wins and he's the star, he'll probably be right in for the Ballon d'Or. So I don't know what you guys think about that, and if you can comment on that kind of relationship that coaches have with players in South America, I'd appreciate it.
Should we take? Do you want to go first, Paul?
Yeah, well, I just want to sort of take issue with the individualistic aspect of Neymar that Eric suggested there. I remember when Neymar was still at Santos and played. I think he played a friendly game in Sweden on the Tuesday night for Brazil, and then flew back private jet and played on the Wednesday for Santos in the Libertadores, I think, if memory serves. This, to me, is not the behaviour of a man who is only concerned about himself. He is an incredible individual talent, but you won't succeed unless you also work with the team around you. And there may be an element of him being able to pick and choose his games, or to try and keep himself as fresh as possible for the World Cup in the summer. He's got unfinished business after what happened in his homeland in 2014, of course. But I don't know if he's particularly an individual in that regard, a selfish individual. He's a wonderful individual footballer, but also one who plays exceptionally well as part of a team.
It was very interesting, though, that he missed one of the most important games of the season for PSG this last weekend. They were playing Lyon away, and they ended up losing the game 2-1. I think I agree with Paul in the fact that he can't be that individualistic. He's a team player and stuff, but missing that kind of game is questionable if he hasn't got this injury that he's reported to have. I think
that's quite a reach there, Joel. I mean, he had a thigh injury and he missed the game, and the game before that he scored 4. And I think people will always question his individual over collective mentality when things like the penalty. He took the penalty off Cavani because Cavani was on a hat trick. But that's just the hunger to be a success, and he's desperate to be a success, and that's what's driven him to become the player that he is at such a young age. So I wouldn't look too much into it. I mean, he would rather have played against Lyon than in a Coupe de France game in midweek, I'm sure. Yeah. So that thigh injury, I would take that at face value.
Okay,
Tim.
Well, there's no doubt that a lot of the South American players are looking for much, much more of a father relationship with the coach than European players. And Scolari, the Brazilian coach, when he was at Chelsea, and he complained about this. He complained that his relationship with a number of the players was like purely professional. Because, he's used to being that father figure. It's always called the Scolari family that he formed. One of Peruvian football's most important former players and coaches, and now coordinating the national team, Juan Carlos Oblitas. And he says that, with the Peruvian players, you've just got to be a paternalist. It's the only possible way to get through to them. And a lot of them are looking for a father figure. And there is that kind of emotive thing. And from our kind of European eyes, seeing Neymar in tears in that training session, in that press conference, when Chichi is talking about what a good team player he is, and how he's such a good player in the group. Watching him break down and cry is like, my God, how old is he? He's like a 5-year old, but you are dealing with people who are more emotive. Now, in terms of the conspiracy theory about him guarding himself for the World Cup, and no doubt about it, the best player in the World Cup is the front runner to win the FIFA World Player of the Year award, and he does put a huge. And one of the reasons that Brazilian football produces such great individuals is there is so much attention on producing the individual player and the individual talent, and individual talent tends to get spoilt. But the one thing against that, and Paris Saint-Germain can afford to lose a league game against Lyon. If he really wants this global prestige, he's got to turn it on in the Champions League as well. So he can't hold back anything. In fact, PSG against Real Madrid in the Champions League it's happening during Carnival, and it's going to bring this country to a standstill. It's already had a change in Carnival. That the judging in Carnival, when the judges the verdict is announced and you read out all the scores, and it takes forever. And it's all like, they give the samba schools their full pompous long name, which goes on forever. Estação Primeira de Mangueira 10, which means 10. It just goes on forever. That judging ceremony, that's being moved earlier in order to make that over by the time that Real Madrid face Paris Saint-Germain, so everyone can watch that in the Champions League. So I think we always knew with Neymar going to Paris Saint-Germain, he wasn't going to be judged by what he does in the French League. He's going to be judged by what happens in the Champions League. And I suppose one fringe benefit from that is that he should be fresher for the World Cup. So what a fascinating few months we've got ahead of us in Neymar's career. It's going to be because there are times when he can be out of control. I thought he had a poor game at Wembley against England. I think the fact that it was Wembley really made him want to put on a show, and he tried to do too much. In World Cup qualifying towards the end of last year, he had a terrible first half against Ecuador when all he wanted to do was showboat and draw fouls, and he just raised the temperature of the game, and he got himself booked yet again because he got frustrated because his fouls weren't being given or whatever, and it was awful. And that's something under pressure. Let's say Brazil, second round of the World Cup against defensive opposition. They're losing perhaps 1-0, or even they're drawing 0-0 with 20 minutes to go. The pressure is on. If there's a goal against you, that's it. You're out. You're out of the World Cup. How Neymar behaves in those kind of situations under that kind of pressure, if you can keep taking the right decisions, that's going to be one of the great themes of watching football in the next few months.
Okay, we've got to sort out what this Brazilian shirt name is going to be for Joel. Let me rattle through some. And Holler, by the way, he doesn't have a say in it, but you, Paul, and Tim have every say in it. Zimbebeto, I don't understand some of them, by the way. I do understand Bebeto, but Zimbebeto. We've got Freddy Kruger. Do you get it? Kruger Rand. Not quite the right country. Not quite the right country, though. But, you know,
right
for
continent.
us... Well, yeah, and also,
African studies.
Who can tell the difference between a white South African accent and a white Zimbabwean accent? I can't.
You clearly can't, Dotun, can you? No.
Well, of course not.
Yeah.
So, Freddy Kruger, or the spiritual boycottino, boycott as in Yorkshire and boycott as in Mugabe.
That's not bad.
Justin Moisey. Did you get this one from... oh, no, that's from Justin in Kyoto, Japan. I got caught out. Okay, fair enough. That was from Justin in Kyoto, Japan. How about Clergy Manon? It says Jed. Clergy Manon? Okay. Halfway do. Mark in Bournemouth has gone for. I said some of them I don't get. Batatino. Or Batatino as well. John in 5 says Joel Nino, resistant to cold in Leeds and heat in Brazil. Joe El Nino.
Yeah, I get that. That's quite good, actually.
So I have to spell it out for you.
Yeah.
Given that you are an undergraduate, some things will have to be spelled out. You know that. And I think this is the best one so far of a bunch. Lee says, surely Brazilian shirt name for my fellow Leeds United sufferer, supporter, should be Revelinho Jr.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah, well, once you said your dad was Vicar,
it came to me. Yeah,
Revelinho Jr. Okay, any of them that you particularly like at the moment?
They're all right. I don't.
Is there any ones that you particularly like?
No, not really.
Why are you so nervous? Just tell
I'm not nervous.
If there's any that you particularly like,
I can't really remember.
Because he knows
them,
it's
to be
a
honest.
trick.
Yeah, exactly. It's a trick question. If I say that one, it won't be that, will it?
This is from Lani in New Jersey. Does Tim think the Brazilian Arthur will join Barcelona or not?
They certainly want him, and he's even been photoed a few months back wearing a Barcelona shirt, and he's a player. You can see him as a kind of future Iniesta. Negotiations are taking place, as I understand it. I think he probably will go. I don't know whether I don't think he's going to go now. I'm not even sure if he's going to go in the summer. And Grêmio, his club, they might want to try and hold on to him until the end of this year.
Is this egg in the pudding too much? Zimbebeto Vic Carlos.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Big shirt.
Big shirt.
Yeah, big shirt.
Yeah, of course. Paul in Chingford is a Palace fan, and they were the Glaziers, and the Eagle took off, and although they've tweaked it a bit, the badge stays roughly the same. He says, I like it. Well, nothing wrong with that.
I think that a tweak is all right. A sharpening up is all right, but a complete sea change is met with huge resistance, generally.
After the draw for the Nations League this week, the draw pulled out the group of death of Belarus, Luxembourg, San Marino and Moldova. Who does Paul think will prevail from this clash of the Titans?
Belarus, put your mortgage on it.
Okay. I'd like Tim's thoughts.
Don't put your mortgage on.
Yeah, no, you definitely don't. Not on my programme in any case. I can't afford to pay your mortgage or buy you a new house. Anyway, I'd like to know Tim's thoughts on Lucas Lima recently moving from Santos to Palmeiras. This seems like a bit of a sideways step after he'd been regularly linked to Barcelona over the last couple of years. At 27, is it now unlikely he'll get a big move to Europe? Nick in Coventry.
I think it probably is, but there are huge advantages in going to Palmeiras. They got lots of money, and he is the man who could really make them tick. Palmeiras are the team to look for in Brazilian football this year. And Lucas Lima, who's a lovely left-footed midfielder, can organise things from box to box. He could be the standout name in Brazilian football this year, and I think Palmeiras give him the platform to be that.
Yeah, lots of questions that we're not going to get through. But Jez from Leicester, long-time listener, first-time texter, lovely show and all the great contributors, both from the World Football crew and your callers. I want to ask, with this new European International League, make European football more insular, and will it make non-European teams more prepared against our teams? Paul?
Well, yeah, I mean, potentially, yes. there are still dates set aside for football associations to create their own friendlies with teams from other confederations. I think what it's going to do is going to give teams of a similar standard the opportunity to play each other, and we're going to see fewer and fewer double-figure scores by Germany against San Marino, for example.
Very
which
quickly,
is a good thing.
Very quickly, Christina Nelson says that one European match at Chelsea, an opponent was booked for wasting too much time taking a free kick, I think. When he was later substituted, he took so long to leave the field that he earned another yellow, was sent off. So very quickly, what is Joel's Brazilian shirt name, guys?
I'm going with Revelino Jr.
Yeah, go on then. All right.
Revelino Jr. it is. You got to get the shirt.
Yeah,
I'll invest
in something, definitely.
Revelino Jr.
Yeah.
He used to be known as Joel Dowson. His mum will now have to call him Revelino Jr. and his wife as well in the future.
BBC 5 Live.